Welcome, friend. If you've ever felt left behind, if you've ever sat in the silence someone else left behind, this space is for you. The ache of abandonment is not loud. It's the quiet echo of a door that won't open again. The stillness that settles after a goodbye. But there is something deeper waiting beneath that ache. A truth, soft as moonlight, that the Buddha once taught. That our pain does not define us. That no loss can take away who we truly are. Tonight, let this story walk beside you. Let it whisper calm into the places that hurt. Let it remind you, you are not alone. You never were. There is peace on the other side of loss. And we'll find it together.
There was once a small monastery nestled beneath a curtain of clouds high in the eastern mountains. It was a place so still that even the wind passed through it gently, as though bowing in reverence. In this monastery lived a young monk named Anzu. Anzu had known the silence of the monastery since he was a boy. The elders said he came to them during a storm, wrapped in a blanket left at the foot of the prayer gate. No name, no note, just a baby and the storm. The monks raised him in the rhythms of the Dharma, sweeping leaves before sunrise, bowing to the Buddha statue at dusk, and learning the sutras by the flicker of oil lamps. But there was one thing Anzu never quite learned: how to be left. Because even though he had no memory of his mother's face, no echo of a father's voice, something in him remembered, not in words, but in ache. There were moments when a monk would walk away to gather firewood or fetch water, and Anzu's breath would catch in his chest. He would watch them disappear down the stone steps, and something ancient in him would whisper, "They might not come back." And sometimes they didn't. Old monks passed away. Wandering monks left without goodbye. Visitors came and went like seasons. Each time someone left, Anzu felt as if a part of himself went with them. He didn't speak of it. He only swept harder, bowed longer, and tried to silence the knot behind his ribs. Until one day, it wasn't a monk or visitor who left. It was May. May was a traveler, a healer from the western forests, who had come to the monastery seeking rest. She arrived with herbs in her pockets and stories in her smile. Her presence was light, but her eyes held storms, the kind that recognized the ones inside Anzu. They sat together under the plum tree, day after day. She spoke of loss. He listened. He spoke of fear. She didn't run. And just when it felt like the ache inside him had finally been met, she was gone. A note, folded in lotus paper, left beside his tea bowl. "I must keep walking. Don't carry me. Let me be the wind." Anzu read the words over and over until they blurred. It wasn't anger that rose. It was absence. He felt the quiet ring louder than any bell. That night, he didn't join the others for evening chants. He walked alone through the gardens, bare feet pressing into the soil, searching for something he could not name. And somewhere beneath the plum tree, he sat down and wept.
not for May, not even for his mother or father, but for all the times love had passed through him like wind through reeds, touching everything, holding nothing. In the distance, the temple bell rang. He didn't rise. He only whispered, "Why does everyone leave?" And the night answered only with stillness. The next morning, the sun rose as it always did, slow, golden, unconcerned with a sorrow in one young monk's chest. But for Anzu, nothing felt the same. He still bowed with the others, hands pressed in gusho. He still lit the incense and swept the courtyard, each motion as silent as breath. But inside, it was as if something sacred had cracked. That morning, the elder monk Daishi watched him. Daishi was old in the way mountains are old, unmoved by storms, shaped by time, and never in a hurry. He had lived through wars and famines, seasons of plenty and seasons of grief. And so, when he saw the dimness in Anzu's eyes, he said nothing at first. He simply sat with him after morning chant, beside the koi pond where the wind left ripples like forgotten dreams. They sat there for a long while, not speaking, until Dashi said, "I see you are carrying something heavy." Anzu lowered his eyes. She left. Daishi nodded gently, as if he had heard those two words 1,000 times from 1,000 mouths. "So has everyone," Anzu added, voice quieter. "Always." The old monk looked toward the horizon, then said, "Have you ever heard the temple bell when no one is here to ring it?" Anzu shook his head. Dashi closed his eyes. "It still exists. The bell does not cease because no one touches it, but it makes no sound. And so we forget it until it is struck." He turned his gaze to Anzu now. "Suffering is like that. It hides in silence, but when someone leaves, it rings." Anzu's breath caught. Daishu continued. "That ringing you hear now, the echo that hurts your heart, it's not only Maid's absence, it's all the departures you've never let go of. All the clinging, all the stories you told yourself that you needed someone to stay to be whole." The words felt like wind inside Anzu, cold, awakening. "I don't know how to stop it," he said. Daishu gave the gentlest smile. "That is why you practice, not to silence the bell, but to hear it without fear." He reached into his robe and handed Anzu a small, smooth stone. "Come find me tomorrow, before dawn," he said. "Bring this with you. There is something you must see." And with that, the old monk rose and walked away, his steps slow, each footfall like a teaching. Anzu sat still for a long time after, holding the stone, listening, not for an answer, but for the silence after the bell. Before the sun had touched the tips of the pines, Anzu rose from his mat. The monastery was still asleep, blanketed in that sacred hush before the first bell of dawn. He carried the small stone Daishi had given him, wrapped in cloth, and walked silently across the courtyard. The dew clung to his sandals. The air was cool, but not cold. It felt like the kind of morning that asked nothing, only that you notice it. He found Daishi sitting by the river beyond the temple wall, where moss grew thick on the stones and the stream flowed as it had for centuries, never asking permission, never staying still. The old monk gestured to a flat rock beside him. Anzu sat, stone still in his lap. "Show me what you carry," Daishi said. Anzu unwrapped the cloth and held out the stone. It was smooth, simple, unremarkable, just like the pain he'd held inside. So ordinary and yet so heavy. Daishi took a second stone from his own robe and placed it beside Anzu's. "Now hold this one in your left hand," he said, "and yours in your right." Anzu obeyed, palms open. They sat like that, unmoving. Minutes passed. Then Daishi spoke. "Now imagine these are your attachments, the stories you grip. One might be May. Another might be a childhood wound, a fear, a belief that you must be loved in a certain way." He paused. "Feel their weight." Anzu nodded. "Now, tighten your fists around them." Anzu clenched. Tighter. His knuckles turned white. His fingers ached. "This is clinging," Daishi said. "Not the stones themselves, but the refusal to let them go." Daishi leaned closer. "Now release your grip, but let the stones stay in your palms." Anzu did. "Do they still exist?" the old monk asked. "Yes." "But do they hurt now?" Anzu shook his head. "Stillness," Daishi whispered, "does not mean emptiness, and presence does not require possession." He let his own stone slide from his palm and fall into the river with a soft splash. Anzu stared at the ripples. "But how do I do that with people?" he asked. "With her?" Daishi turned to him. "You do not let go of them. You let go of the expectation that they must stay, that they must understand you, that they must never leave." He added gently, "They were never yours to carry." Anzu looked at the stone in his palm, and in that quiet moment, it felt lighter than before, not because it had changed, but because he had. The bell rang across the valley. Not the heavy, thunderous one that called monks to prayer, but the gentle wind bell, the one that swayed by itself, needing no hand, no push, no permission to sing. Anzu sat beside the Zendo wall, the same place where he used to sit with Mei during their early days, when silence between them felt like a bond rather than the void. But now he was alone, or so it seemed. Daishi's words had settled into him like mist, not immediately seen, but gradually felt. They were never yours to carry. At first, the sentence had landed like a stone, cold, final, but now it echoed differently, not as rejection, but as freedom. May had left, yes, but perhaps she had not been taken from him. Perhaps her going had simply been part of the flow, like the bell
that rang only when a wind touched it. He looked to the courtyard, where young monks were sweeping fallen leaves. One leaf floated gently from a high branch and landed on a rake, only to be brushed away a moment later. It struck him. That's all it was. May had come into his life, landed briefly on the branch of his being, and when the time came, she drifted elsewhere. The pain came not from her leaving, but from his reaching back again and again to catch what had already fallen. He had filled his life with the noise of what wasn't there. Conversations that would never be finished. Apologies never offered. Hands that would never touch his again. All the while, he had ignored the space she left behind. Wide, open, sacred. In Zen, they say, the space between notes is what makes music. Perhaps the space left by others is what makes us whole. He rose slowly and returned to his quarters. The same small room, the same wooden floor. But everything felt new. He took the cloth that had once wrapped the stone and folded it, not to bind, but to honor. Then he placed it on the windowsill, where light could touch it each morning. The next morning, Anzu did something he hadn't done since May left. He brewed 2 cups of tea, one for himself and one for her. He placed them side by side on the small table, just as they used to sit in the early days of spring when the cherry blossoms fell like soft confetti through the open window. But this time, he did not pretend she would return. He did not cling to the hope that the door might open. He did not imagine her voice or hold his breath for a ghost. He simply sat, one hand around his cup, one cup left untouched. He sat in the company of the space she left, and it didn't ache. It breathed, like wind through trees, like sunlight over still water. It moved gently through him, not painful, not joyful, just alive. She entered quietly, but Anzu didn't startle. The old monk sat beside him, folding his legs beneath his robe. "She's not coming back," Anzu said. Daishi nodded. "No." A long silence followed. Then Anzu added, "But I think I understand now." Daishi waited. Anzu turned to the untouched cup. She left, but what remained was not emptiness. It was room. Room for silence, for stillness, for peace. The elder monk's eyes crinkled with quiet approval. "When we stop holding on," Daishi said, "we start holding space." Anzu smiled, not from joy, but from ease. There was nothing to fix, no apologies to beg for, no closure to force. Just this moment. 2 cups, one filled, one not, and between them, peace. Outside, the wind bell rang again. This time Anzu heard it fully. And now, let the story soften. Let it ripple outward like a quiet breath through still trees. What does it mean to be left behind? What does it mean to sit with the memory of someone who is no longer beside us. In the silence that follows departure, there is something sacred, not just absence, but space. When someone leaves, a friend, a lover, a parent, a child, we often clutch their memory like a thread that's unraveling. But the Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. Not because love is wrong, not because we should not feel, but because when we hold on too tightly, we forget how to open. Forget the stillness that can only be heard in an empty room. We forget that the heart has its own seasons, and sometimes the most beautiful growth comes from letting go. If you've known loss, if you've sat with the ache of someone not returning, know this: you are not broken. You are spacious. You are whole, even in your longing. Breathe into that space. Let go of what you thought should have stayed, and you may just find that what remains is not sorrow, but peace. Now, let your shoulders soften. Let your hands unclench. Let your breath deepen like a slow river at dusk. You've walked through the story. You've sat beside your own ache. And now, dear listener, you are ready to rest. Let the night carry you. Let a stillness cradle you. And may you wake with a heart a little lighter and a soul a little freer. Good night.